so here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. Ian, so here to stay.
Morning all, how we doing? Just a real quick one this morning to cover the retained list. I've just had a chat with Jake and Ben. We decided it's probably going to take a week off the pod this week. There's only really the retained list to talk about. We talked about Mark Kennedy last week. Very, very little has happened since. And you're not going to get an hour out of the retained list. So thought I'd have a quick look at it. A little bit of, do they call it housekeeping maybe? Just made an announcement this morning. We've been chatting to the Former Players Association, and over the course of the summer, we're hoping to bring you 3 or 4 podcasts at least with former players. Got a couple of exciting names lined up and people who've played with really through interesting periods. So quite looking forward to that. And 1 or 2 of them you might have heard from elsewhere that might be around the club at the moment. That might be familiar faces, but we're hoping that we can get them talking about, about their career a little bit more in depth than perhaps they can with a microphone in their hand on a match day. So that should be quite good. So let's go and let's look at the retained list, shall we, quickly? I mean, I've got a reluctant dog. I don't know if you can see him behind me. He's not particularly, he's there, look, he's not particularly excited about this walk. I'm not. Unfortunately, I am in the hospital this afternoon for a myocardial perfusion scan, which is not going to be particularly pleasant. But anyway, retained list. So first of all, let's look at the 2 players that have been released. One of them is Max Melbourne. So I think that's probably one of the least surprising pieces of news that's ever come out of a retained list. I think it was obvious that Max was going to be released. Last year at this time, he was told he didn't have a future at the club, but he had a year on his contract. I think he was told at the same time as Zach Elbouzedi. Zach got a move to the top flight in Sweden. Max got a move to Stevenage. Didn't work out from there. Came back to us. I mean, he did well, by the way, at Walsall before that, the end of the season before, but didn't work out for him at Stevenage. Came back, brief cameo, and he's gone. I feel a little bit for Max because I don't think his attitude really could ever have been brought into question. I mean, he was told, he was more or less leaving the club when he went to Walsall. Potentially could have gone there at full time. Their manager changed. He came back to us. Didn't get his move in the summer. Got a break in the first team. Didn't do badly. Didn't do brilliantly. Kicked out, but back out to Stevenage. You've got no future. Then when needs must, do you know what? Come round again. A bit like a booty call, really, wasn't it? The football equivalent of a booty call. You keep saying never go back, and then there he is, dependable. Last touch in a Lincoln shirt, first goal in a Lincoln shirt, which was quite good for him. I think it was a nice way to sign off. But I think that when I did my my breakdown of Max yesterday, 35 games in 3 seasons, because bear in mind he joined actually under Danny Cowley. He was one player that managed to work all the way through the Mike Clapperton reign without leaving the club, which I think was more luck than good fortune than it was anything else. I think he'll end up in League 2. I think he's a solid League 2 player. I think any League 2 side who hope to be pressing on the outer edges of the playoffs would do well to put Max Melbourne in their team. He can play left back, he can play left centre back. He's athletic. I think he will continue to learn. He's played League 1 football, albeit kind of maybe 9 or I think was it 9, 10 starts, 12 starts maybe. So that'll be attractive enough. He'll turn up in League League 2. The other player released and not coming back, of course, is John Marquis. Again, absolutely no surprise whatsoever there. I think John Marquis arrived in a blaze of glory. Big name, lots of goals. And on the face of it, if you'd said he'll score you 5 goals between now and the end of the season, you would go, yeah, all right, I'll take that. Those 5 goals were the difference, 4 points difference. I think he won us 4 points with his goals. He scored at Plymouth in a game we won 2-1. Without his goal, it would have been 1-1. We beat Sheffield Wednesday. So, again, to kind of go back to that girl analogy, it's one of those where you're waving them goodbye. We're not sad that it's finished, but we'll always have that one afternoon against Sheffield, where obviously he was the hero and it was one of the biggest results of last season. It was the best home result of last season. But let's be honest, John Marquis was reported to be one of the higher earners, and by the end of the season he was sitting on the bench while the likes of Ben House and Liam Cullen were starting games for us. I think that was reflective of where we were going. I don't think there was an ever after once he only scored 2 in whatever 16 games. You know, there was never any real doubt. I don't think that he was going to depart, and I don't think it's a budget thing. I just think it's cost versus output. If I'm honest, I think there's a decision been made there. I also wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't turn up somewhere down south. I know Charlton have been heavily rumoured. I don't particularly buy into that at the moment. But somebody like that will take a punt on him. He won't end up in League Two. He'll be in League One. He'll be with a League One side that are a little bit more ambitious, but not one I think that will be sold on his Doncaster form, because since then he's not had brilliant time at Portsmouth or at Lincoln. But he clapped a lot, so we'll remember him for that. And I don't mean that facetiously. He did get it. He did understand. He did help, I think, build a little bit of a bridge in there some of those final games. And even though he wasn't scoring goals, he was a popular figure. And I think that there is an underlying message there, potentially for Mark Kennedy, and certainly for other members of the squad. If you don't put in a particularly great performance, you can salvage a little bit of that by coming over to the fans, and not just a cursory walk over to the centre circle, clap in our direction and walk away. John Marquis almost did a full lap. People respected him for that, even though he didn't particularly perform on the pitch. You've got to do one of the two: perform on the pitch. But if you're up and down on there, a bit of a clap goes a long way, doesn't it? So they're the two players that are definitely leaving the club. The other player that was out of contract and we've exercised an option on is Sean Rowan. No surprise there either, really, is there? I mean, a year ago, Sean was going off for trials at Southampton and at Chelsea, and he disappeared pretty damn quick after I think we got beat 3-1 by Portsmouth, didn't we, at home? John Marquis scored a couple, funnily enough, and Rowan played left back. I think he got taken off, and we didn't really see him much after that at all. So I think there's still a player in him. I hope that being away, playing regular football with Rahida, a regular senior football, which he hasn't had. Let's bet, he had sort of a few months, a few kind of 11, 12 games, I think, with us before he dropped out the side. I think that it will help his development. I certainly hope so. I like Sean Rowan. I like the fact that at 16, 17 years old, he looked to be a comfortable left back at this level. Not, he made the odd error. I get that. I like his physicality. He looks to have that never say die attitude. I think there is a player in Sean Rowan that may not be evident when he comes back this summer. 3 or 4 seasons down the line, I think that there's easily a championship defender in there, if not higher. There's elements of his game at a young age that I can see, and I can see why he perhaps fell out of favour a little bit. Some kind of elements around his game that are probably associated with being young and breaking through too quick, perhaps then began to hold him back. But remember, we've now got a manager who, I mean, the fact he's Irish is by the by. Sean's Irish, manager's Irish. Oh, they'll get on. That's not the case. We've got a manager, though, who came through at a young age and seemingly had the world at his feet, and then struggled to perform to that level at Liverpool. And it took Mark Kennedy several seasons of not doing it for Liverpool before he went off to Man City and to Wolves and to Ipswich and played for Ireland. So I think that there's a good role model there for Sean. We've exercised the option. If it's only a year, I would expect him to come back in August and for us to enter into talks with him. Almost certainly. If it is a year option, if it's any more than a year option, then brilliant. But I think that players like Sean could be slow burners. And I go to the person I go to is Callum Lang at Wigan, who came through the ranks at Wigan, went off on loan here, there, everywhere. Shrewsbury was on loan out. Was it Morecambe, Accrington, somewhere like that? Didn't seem to be near the Wigan Athletic setup, but they kept giving him the new deal. They kept playing him. They kept sending him out on loan because they could see the development, and he's turned into a fairly handy striker. A player doesn't have to have one loan and then come back and be the first team player. Not when you're a League One side. There can be a couple of loans on the back of that. There can be a couple of spells away from the club. As long as their development is being monitored closely, there's no reason why Sean Rowan couldn't, for instance, come back this season, not get in the team, go out and play League Two football again, another loan, and then come back and impact the team. I like Sean Rowan. I think there's a future there. I'm delighted to see that we didn't release him. We were never going to. It'd be like giving away a lottery ticket that you'd bought for Friday's Euro Millions on Thursday morning, wouldn't it? Going, no, it's not going to be a winner. It's not going to happen. You may as well just hang on to it. You've got the option there. It's not going to cost anything. Take him up on it. So the other news that came out of the retained list was 2 players entered into conversations to remain at the club, Conor McGregor and Liam Bridcut. I would be delighted to see one of them stay, and I don't really mind which one. I'd like to see Liam Bridcut stay in a hybrid capacity. I think if we're just signing him on as a player, we haven't had enough out of him over the last 2 years. We have when he's been on the field. I'm trying to put this the right way, but he didn't hit 20 games this season, and we were worse for it. Now, the fact we were worse for it proves that he has value to the first team. The fact that we weren't as good with Liam Bridcut out of the team as we are with him in the team proves that to have him in the team benefits us. But we have to know that we're going to have him around the team for 25 games, or we have to not be reliant on him. And then if you're signing Liam Bridcut on for 20 games, but then having to find another 4 who is also going to play 30 odd games, you've got to balance that. So I think as an outright player contract, Liam Bridcut might be a difficult sell. And I think I've seen Craig Robertson, sorry, not Craig Armstrong. Craig Armstrong was the guy I had a head-on collision with in 1998 in Horncastle. So Craig said he would have rather kept Marquis over Bridcut. No room on the bus for sick notes. Now, there isn't any room on the bus for a sick note if he's expected to play 45 games a season, 46 games a season. If we take him on in a coaching capacity as well, which I can see, I'd like Liam Bridcut to stay. And if it's a coaching capacity with a pay-as-you-play deal attached, or a reduced playing wage or whatever, I think that there's value to have him around the team. Conor McGregor's stifled in the 4. We've got to sign a midfielder that plays in front of the back 4. If we go into this season saying Conor McGregor is going to be that player and we sign him on a new deal, that worries me personally. Certainly in the first half of the season, Conor gave the ball away in some key areas. Wimbledon springs to mind, where he gave the ball away and then had to go and commit the foul for the penalty, and they beat us 1-0. And that game we should never have lost. We should never have won it, but we shouldn't have lost it. There's value in Conor McGregor's. I'd be really, really surprised if he stays. I mean, really surprised. The noises coming out of the club. I had a conversation with key figures at the club at the beginning of last season, and they said, we're a little bit concerned about potentially what the future holds, or this one person said concerned about what the future holds for Conor McGregor's, because he's likely to go back to Scotland, and there was the talk of Scottish Premier teams coming in for him, and whatever your perception of the Scottish Premier League is, and some people say, oh, it's League One quality, blah, blah, blah. There was a Scottish Premier League team in the Europa League final last night. Okay, Conor McGregor won't sign for Rangers. He's playing Rangers 4 times a season, and Celtic 4 times a season. There's 8 big games to play in, and that's without the other games that are big in Scotland that you might not think are, the likes of Hearts and Hibs. You're playing in a capital city, and yeah, I think the lure of Scotland might be too much for Conor, and I do wonder if the negotiations, rather than releasing them, I wonder if there's an element of, if we say Conor's gone, people are going to start going, well, who's going to replace him? Because social media and football fans are an unforgiving bunch. So perhaps there's an element of, we're in negotiations with them, but maybe just they're not all that positive, and thinking, well, let's just hold off until we know that there's some positive news on the incoming thing. Oh my Lord. 1 minute. Charlie, what? Okay. My dog's just been in a field and he's soaking wet. So that's where we are with the players that we're in negotiations with. Obviously, the loan players all went back to their clubs. That's the most pointless bit of any retained list news, isn't it? The following players will return to their clubs, as if actually we've borrowed them, we're just not going to give them back. Like your neighbour who borrows your lawnmower or borrows something from you, and then you never ever give it back. It's like, we're going to do that with Brook Norton Coffee. Arsenal come, you've got Brook Norton Coffee. No, mate, we gave it back ages ago. Do you know what I mean? No, this is our Brook Norton coffee. No, no, he's definitely ours. Yeah, no, he's not yours. Yeah, I know it looks like yours. It's not going to happen, is it? So they've all gone back. Expect Manchester City, because we keep giving all their toys back, they'll keep loaning us toys. So expect Manchester City to loan us someone next season. I was trying to find who was in their under 15s team, the years that Mark Kennedy worked with them, and kind of back engineer a story from there, but I lost interest because it's really hard, and it's also really risky searching for under 15s on the internet, even if it is Manchester City. So I gave that a miss. The final thing, I think a lot of people were coming out on social media and saying things like, so we're keeping all the Crocs, or expected such and such to go. The retained list is just functional housekeeping. So it's just players that are out of contract. We're telling you what are going to happen with them. And that's why you see loan players going back. It's functional. We have to put it on there. We have to put on there the players that are under contract for next season. There's 55 of you watching live now. Thank you very much. Is there one of you that genuinely thought that in the retained list we were going to put, and we thank Max Sanders for his efforts, but he's not wanted? Of course not. One, the manager might want him. Mark Kennedy hasn't met a lot of these players, so there'll be no door closing. And secondly, at this stage of the season, very few teams are going to be buying players anyway. Contracts are still, I don't think you can actually officially sign players until June the 1st. I might be wrong. But we're never going to do that. We're never going to put, like Peterborough did, this player's transfer listed. It's not the way we work. So there will be players on that retained list who are contracted at the club next season that other clubs know are available for transfer. And who they might be, I don't know. Theo Archibald, possibly not now Mark Kennedy's come in. Tom Hopper didn't get a lot of games towards the end of the season. He's going into the last year of his contract. Maybe we're looking for a different kind of striker option up there. It's hard when people say we need to get rid of the Crocs, and I kind of hate that. But let's take somebody that has had an injury record that's been challenging, and that's Joe Walsh. What do you expect the retained list to say? And what do you expect the club to do? We've paid Joe Walsh up the remainder of his 1 year, 2 year. I don't know. He signed a new deal at the end of last season, didn't he? We've paid him up the rest of his contract and he's gone. So then they go, well, why have we wasted money on that? We may as well have kept him. You're not going to get somebody coming in going, yeah, we'll buy Joe Walsh off you at this stage of the season right now, because he is an injury risk and clubs are going to wait to see who's available on a free transfer. And who's to say that his injury problems aren't actually behind him? We talk about this signing of Crocs, and it's misinformation, because players that I've been speaking to the club, we have signed players with dubious injury records in the past. Ted Bishop had played a full season, by the way, before he came, and he didn't have a bad season last season. He wasn't injured as some players. And you talk about, somebody was saying about Chris Maguire, and I remember Clive shot him down on social media saying, he had played however many games, like 85% of the games his clubs had been involved in over the past few seasons, and when he was, bar when Lee Johnson dropped him at Sunderland. Michael Boswick, he was a injury risk when we signed him, and he's a hero. Nobody'd call him a Croc. Michael O'Connor was when we signed him. He was pretty much a hero, played plenty of games. Lee Frecklington came in, was injured actually, were horrible tackle at Port Vale when we beat him 6-2. You can't legislate for that, but he had got himself fit again. Neil Eardley was player of the year after we signed him with injury problems. So I don't buy this. We've got to get rid of Crocs. There's no such thing as a Croc. And it's kind of like, I suppose it's like me today, isn't it? I'm going to go off and have my radioactive blast test on my heart or something. But my boss employed me 2 years ago and I didn't have a bad sickness record. If I have this and I've got like the rest of the afternoon off to go and do that, and then I've got another test at hospital next week. So it looks at that point like I'd be at risk, but it might be in 6 weeks' time, 8 weeks' time, a month's time, 2 years' time, I'm fit. I'm okay, and there's no more kind of problems. And footballers are like that. I think one or two players are unlucky with injuries. I think to label them a Croc is harsh. That said, I do expect people from that 26-man retained list to leave. Not the young players. I think we'll have a few of those go out on loan. But I certainly expect one or two of the senior pros to leave as well. So, right, well, look, thank you very much. It was always intended to be a quick one. Just going through, see if there's anything. Cornell's awake, I see, to see if there was anything on here worth picking up? I don't think so. Oh, Adam Barlow, totally off topic. Any news on match programs for next season? Well done on the fitness. Thank you, Adam. My understanding was the program was okay for next season, but I haven't heard anything official, so I don't know whether that's the case or not. But that was certainly what I was led to believe at some point, I think. So, and Pete says Tom Eaves as a potential signing. I think Cornell said Richie Smallwood. It's a great time, isn't it, where we can keep plucking the names out and looking through. I kind of like the idea of Alex Gorin. I did wonder if, given that our recruitment works on that kind of due diligence and going back over time, I wondered if we might look at Ellis Sims again, who was at Hearts last season. You know, would a loan back to our level be right? I also wondered about Taylor Richards. He's the boy that was at Man City, moved to Brighton. Now, he was on loan in the Championship last season, but he didn't play an awful lot of games. He actually got injured during his medical. I don't know if you remember Taylor Richards. He tore as a new one when we drew with Doncaster. I think it was Doncaster, wasn't it? I think he played for Doncaster. The day that we lost to them and missed 2 penalties. Really liked the look of him. Now he, as I say, he was doing some sort of jumping board, fell off the board, injured himself during his medical at Birmingham City, who he joined on loan last season. So there's a potential relationship there between him and Mark Kennedy, and he's the sort of player I would imagine that would be on our list. I've also seen Rowan Boateng as well. Yeah, Boateng's a player that I've always liked quite a lot. Understand Exeter are quite keen on taking him back there, which might be a good fit. I think he was Bristol Rovers as well, so I wonder if he might go back down the West Country rather than coming up here. I don't think he'll sign for Lincoln, but he'd be a good shout. Right, I'm nearly at home now. I've got loads of work to do before I go off to the hospital. So all I'm going to say is thank you everybody for watching. And if there's any more news, we'll let you know. Other than that, sit tight for the former players podcasts. Thanks a lot. Bye.